welcome to another episode of Autism Exchange, the show where two Aspies share the things they're obsessed with. I'm ForceWave.
And I'm HubPie, and Autism Exchanging is just another part of the life of the average Aspie.
You're goddamn right. And today, oh boy. So I've been looking forward to doing the Metal Gear show in general, but this is the one I've been really looking forward to.
This is the big boy. This is the big boy that every Metal Gear podcast, I think since Solid 1, you kept bringing up in some way.
Yeah, because the thing we're going to talk about today is very controversial, and whether you like the game or not, it's a fascinating topic. I think everyone, regardless of their opinion, can agree on that at least. Like the way this thing came about, the motivations behind the game, the reaction, how that affected the series. One of my old friends from the Snake Suit told me, I really can't wait till you talk about this game. And he fucking hates this game.
Oh boy. 5 out of 10 Metal Gear fans like Metal Gear Solid 4, and then the other 5 hate the game.
Yeah, so today, as Hub says, we're going to talk about the grand finale of the series, at least chronologically, fuck Rising, Metal Gear Solid 4, Guns of the Patriots.
Think of this as like the apex of our Metal Gear discussions. We'll still do Metal Gear discussions, but they're going to be a lot smaller in scale. This is going to be like the big boy project.
This is Infinity War, and the next couple episodes are going to be Ant-Man and the Wasp, by comparison.
Yeah, essentially.
So just to give you some background on my experience with this game, as I mentioned last episode, I played Metal Gear Solid 3. I adored the game. I sought out copies of every other game in the series. I even got an MSX emulator up and running so I can play the MSX games. But unfortunately, I was a Halo Xbox dude bro back then, so I didn't have a PS3. So my only hope of being able to finish this epic story that I got heavily emotionally invested in was the hope that I got a PS3 for Christmas. So I waited for half a goddamn year, with pretty much nothing but this game on my mind. It was pretty much my most anticipated game up to that point, and the game was already released. I didn't play the game until Christmas of 2009, but oh man, that Christmas morning, it was like, okay, I got the PS3, whatever, doesn't matter, that's just a box. What I'm really here for is still in these piles of presents. So I get one of the presents, and I start to unwrap it, and I was like, oh, yes, I have it. The thing I've sought for so long.
So pretty much you were like, Metal Gear Solid 4! Oh my god!
Yeah, I was that N64 kid, but with Metal Gear Solid 4. So I played a game, took me a few days to beat it, I got my mind completely fucked, as expected. You know, I played all the other games, I even got a PSP for Portable Ops and Peace Walker. I knew what I was fucking getting myself into. So yeah, my first playthrough, I was like, oh my god, that was amazing! 10 out of 10! But then I went on the internet.
A familiar story.
Yeah. There was this website called Metal Gear Solid, the unofficial site. And I wanted to share my love for this game with other people. Little did I realize that I was walking into a fucking minefield. And unfortunately, I didn't have any #1 fans to warn me.
Well, you didn't have your own deep throats.
No, I got a $3 whore instead. I got jack shit.
Oof. Jack the ripoff.
Yeah, I didn't know that Metal Gear Solid 4 was such a contentious title within the fandom. Because if you go on, like, the normie gaming media, it gets 10 out of 10s everywhere. The game's accolades are on par with that of The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time.
Goddamn.
I was like, what the fuck? So at first I started fighting back against these people, like, oh, these people are just haters. They don't understand a game like I do. But after a while, there eventually became chinks in my MGS4 defense armor, and I had to concede, okay, there are some valid criticisms about the game.
Your nanomachines failed you.
Oh god. And after a while, my opinion of this game started to really flip-flop. I didn't know whether I loved it or hated it. And it would always slip between those two extremes. I never really settled on a concrete opinion until recently. Years away from the fan base, years of not playing through the series. I recently played through all the games directed by Kojima, Flock Rising, and that's when I think I settled on my opinion of the game, which is, I love it, but I acknowledge that it is chocked to the brim with fucking bullshit.
Just to get this out of the way now, this game is like peak Hideo Kojima. Everything that is good about Kojima is in this game, but everything that is bad about Kojima is also in this game.
Yeah, and the volume is turned all the way up, because it's the grand finale of the Metal Gear Saga, Fuck Rising. So...
Oh boy, I can't wait till we get to that episode.
Yeah, we're gonna get to it, but for now... So, it's like the ending of Batman Begins, where Commissioner Gordon talks about escalation. Alright, well, we start using semi-automatics, they buy automatics. We start wearing Kevlar, they start using armor-piercing rounds. And you're wearing a mask, jumping off rooftops. So yeah, Metal Gear Solid 4 has a very big taste for the theatrical.
Oh, does it?
But anyway, enough about me for now. Hub, you recently played Metal Gear Solid 4, is that correct?
Yes. In fact, the day we were recording this, I actually decided to give myself a week to really sit with the game, watch some videos of it, read some perspectives on the game, both from people who liked and didn't like this game. Because originally we were going to do our podcast immediately after I finished it, but then I decided, well, considering the way you talk about how this game has a lot of shit to discuss, I decided, well, it'd be best to wait a week just so I can finalize my opinion of the game.
Which is fair, and in the meantime, I really started to try to pin down everything I wanted to say about this game. I've done more preparation for this episode than I've done for any of our previous episodes. Even with Metal Gear Solid 1, my favorite game of all time, I didn't do as much preparation for that game.
Well, I just assumed because you knew what you wanted to talk about with Metal Gear Solid 1 in the first place.
Right. But anyway, so now that you've had a week to think about your thoughts, did you like it?
I'm gonna be on the mixed to positive end for Metal Gear Solid 4 because while I ultimately liked the game, there are some things about it that I don't care about, and I can definitely understand why there is a large section of the Metal Gear community that just outright does not like this game. It's not like the first three Solids and Metal Gear 2 where I was very positive towards them. This one, I'm positive to MGS4 as a whole, but there are some stuff that makes me hesitant on wanting to replay it because during the week preparation for this podcast, in addition to reading up on a bunch of different resources, I replayed Metal Gear Solid 1 through 3, and I really enjoyed replaying those games. I have no trouble replaying them, but for Metal Gear Solid 4, there is a brick wall called Act 3 that really discourages me from wanting to replay the game.
I think mixed to positive is a good place to be with Metal Gear Solid 4. Like, there's some people who are like, man, this game is a masterpiece, 10 out of 10. And it's like, okay, slow down. It isn't.
Okay, buddy, I get being a shill and all, but come on, don't take it too far.
But then there's some people who are like, this game betrays everything that the series stands for. This game ruined the series. Kojima's a hack who didn't know what he was doing. He was just catering to fan service.
So what you're saying is Metal Gear Solid 4 was taken over by fascists.
Yeah, that's the thing. Metal Gear Solid 4 and The Rise of Skywalker are very similar in that they were both unplanned grand finales to a series that was already concluded. Metal Gear Solid 2 was meant to be the chronological end of Metal Gear. Just like how Star Wars Episode 6 was the original ending to the Skywalker saga. But they extended it and threw some extra curveballs. And it's like, a lot of this stuff's weird. And some people really love it, some people really hate it. What do you think about that?
I'll say right now, I think it worked much better for Star Wars than it did for Metal Gear.
Yeah, I agree.
Because if you were to tell me Return of the Jedi was the finale after the prequel trilogy, I would be like, this is a really anticlimactic end. But if you were to tell me that Metal Gear Solid 2 was the finale, I'd be like, I can kind of see it because I brought up the talking point how it's kind of perfect going full circle, how in Metal Gear 2, you're in an area with a bunch of war orphans, and the theoretical finale of the series, you play as one of those war orphans. In addition to all the layers upon layers of its plots that people are saying, whoa, Kojima called this years in advance, dude. And the artificial recreation of the Shadow Moses incident with Big Shell. If you told me that was the finale, I would totally be okay with it. But I wasn't someone who grew up with the Metal Gear series and followed it for years. I'm someone who played the series at a relatively short amount of time, and I knew even with Metal Gear Solid 2's ending, this wasn't the end, not by a long shot.
And I think that's interesting, because we're going to talk about some of the revelations later on, and when I asked you about one in particular, you seem very indifferent about it.
Yeah, because you said that was like one of the, if not the, make it or break it point of the game, and I was just kind of indifferent to it, which is probably very surprising to some people.
I think what's happening is those who grew up with the series, with years in between installments, that's enough time to fill in the gaps on your own. So when a new game comes along and fills in the gaps differently than what people initially filled them with, then that can create some animosity. Whereas if you're playing all the games pretty much one after the other like you have, what seems like a stupid, out-of-nowhere revelation to you just comes off as, I guess that's part of the story.
Yeah, well, I'll say right now in regards to that particular twist, I can totally understand the people who don't like it, and even I've had times where I believe a series should have gone the way I think it should have, only to be disappointed that it didn't. But I always think about these kinds of things, and I try to not let my personal biases or what I think should happen really take over what is really there. You see, I'm trying to see things for what they are and not what I want them to be, basically.
Ha ha ha. I see what you did there.
Yeah. So, if you couldn't tell, we're not going to be doing a plot recap because this game has a lot of plot to recap. We're just going to be talking about the certain divisive points in the story, some character arcs, and we're going to be talking about the two sides of the coin to how people feel about this game primarily, because I feel like you can't discuss Metal Gear Solid 4 without talking about the disparity between those who like it and those who don't, in addition to how this game came about as far as development is concerned.
But before all that, let's talk about the gameplay. What'd you think about it?
At first, on a gameplay perspective, it looks to be what I consider to be Metal Gear's gameplay perfected, where the CQC mechanics are a bit more refined. They don't feel as beginner hostile, unlike MGS3. The sneaking controls feel more refined. Snake actually learns how to crouch walk in this game. You think that'd be something he would have learned a long time ago, but I guess not.
He technically did it in past games when he wore the cardboard box and ran around, and just now he's able to do it without the box.
This is a really weird feeling without this cardboard box.
I feel so lost, helpless. Who am I, really?
It was my destiny to be in this box. Yeah, at first it seems like it's the perfect MGS gameplay style. And then you get some things like Drebin's shop, which is kind of like Kojima predicting microtransactions in a way.
I was just about to bring that up.
Yeah, so unlike past games where there would be points where you would have to choose between conserving, let's say, a chaff grenade because there are ciphers that you don't want to deal with, in this game, you don't have to worry about that because you meet a guy named Drebin who has a very awesome monkey. I love that monkey.
Little Gray.
Yeah, and like me, Drebin also has a caffeine addiction to soda, and he opens up this shop where you can buy access to guns, which we'll discuss why that is in a bit. You can buy ammo and a bunch of different supplies, so the way it came across to me was, if you don't like stealth, first off, why the hell are you even playing this game? But it feels like you can basically play Metal Gear Solid 4 in a more gung-ho fashion, which I chose not to do because I've been playing the series a particular way, and I didn't want to deviate from that now of all times. And even though the shop came in handy, I couldn't help but feel like, man, I kind of wish that the game had more challenge in the sense that I had to conserve my resources instead of being like, oh, I ran out of trinks. Well, it looks like I can call up the shop and buy some more ammo for it.
On the boss extreme, you can't buy any tranquilizer ammo, and on any difficulty, you can't buy chaff grenades. So you have to know where the chaff grenades are throughout the game in order to get past those obnoxious gecko.
I was just using the chaff grenade as an example, off the cuff. So it feels like the game, in a way, is kind of emphasizing more just reckless gameplay, and in a stealth game, that's just kind of dumb.
Some people have called MGS4 Metal Gears of War.
I mean, I can kind of see it, but again, I chose to play the game like a Metal Gear game. So I didn't get to run into his action unless it was absolutely mandatory, or if I was an idiot and got caught.
And what was your story reason for wanting to continue to play non-lethally?
Okay, so at the end of Metal Gear 2, before you fight Big Boss, he talks to Snake about how soldiers like him and Snake are doomed to be in the battlefield, and once you experience the battlefield, you can't get away from it. And Big Boss, despite what Snake Eater shows us, becomes a monster. So for the style I chose to play Metal Gear in, I decided to play non-lethally, and in the games that had the trank, I would always rather trank my enemies instead of killing them. The only time I would kill enemies is if I had absolutely no choice to. Otherwise, I would just either trank them or avoid contact altogether, just to prove Big Boss's words wrong that just because someone experiences this stuff doesn't mean they're destined to become a ruthless killer like he did.
I love that you put that thought into your playstyle, and in fact, that's even acknowledged somewhat in the actual game design, because there's an Easter egg where if you kill enough enemies in an area, Snake will hear a flashback from Liquid in MGS1 where he says, "You enjoy all the killing, that's why." And then he'll throw up and lose a shit ton of sight.
Yet despite that, my most recent run of Metal Gear Solid 1, I didn't really kill anyone unless I had to.
Nah. Oh, by the way, fuck people who say Solid Snake has no emotions. There's a whole gameplay mechanic dedicated to Snake's emotional state.
It's kind of like this game's equivalent of the stamina gauge in MGS3, except in order to stress Snake out, you have to get seen by enemies, and the longer you're targeted, the higher the stress gauge will go. And at one point I found you can get something called Combat High, which will up your stress. And when Snake is stressed, that starts to affect him, and I think he takes more damage from enemy attacks, and it affects his abilities.
It's more difficult to aim to lower your sight gauges.
Yeah, you don't want Snake to be stressed out.
It's a very Kojima thing to do, to have the player think of their player avatar as kind of like a pet that you have to take care of. Make sure it's well fed and Snake Eater, or make sure it's happy enough to do its job.
It's not that involved. It's not so complex that it becomes a problem.
Sure, but at least gets people thinking about their character as something more than just a vessel.
Yeah.
So you enjoyed Metal Gear Solid 4's gameplay in general, you would say?
For the most part, yeah. I still think Snake Eater, as far as design goes, is in my opinion, the peak of Metal Gear Solid gameplay. But Metal Gear Solid 4, I think in some ways is an improvement, the improved CQC controls. But then that fucked me up when I went back to MGS3 and was like, oh right, it's circle in this game, not R1. Oh yeah, and then there's the camo system, which is a bit different because in this game, if you hug a wall or the ground for a certain amount of time, which is maybe 2 seconds, Snake's body armor will blend in with the background. It's basically a more streamlined version of the camo system in MGS3.
These days, when I play Metal Gear Solid 3, I don't even bother changing camos most of the time. I just hide in the grass.
That's the dominant strategy most of the time.
The general consensus is Acts 1 and 2 are the best parts of the game.
I would contest Act 1 because I think Act 1 just has a bit too many stop and go sections for me to really call it one of the best parts of the game. Act 2 was pretty good for the most part. And then Act 3 came and I wanted to fucking throw my controller.
You were running into problems that I never did. And I was like, what?
Yeah, so for context, half of Act 3, you have to tail what's essentially a resistance member to find Big Mama, and you have to basically tail them. Sometimes they'll stop because there are some soldiers that you have to take out, and then they'll continue their route. Or if you take too long, they will change their route, but every time they change their route, I ended up losing them.
And they keep whistling, even though it's a curfew.
Yeah, like, I get that they do that just to let the player know where they're at, but it's a fucking curfew. That's like asking to get caught. Not to mention, you have to go through like at least 3 sections of these, so you have to tail this dude for a while. Granted, if you lose the guy, then, you can always find another one. This is where the solid eye really helps, because enemies are coded in red and allies are coded in blue, which I kind of didn't know in Act 2, because during Act 1, you can take out some of Liquid's soldiers to get the people of that country to be on your side. I didn't know this at the beginning of Act 2, so I basically just tranked every member of the Resistance to take all their stuff to get Drebin points. So basically, I was an asshole for the first part of that chapter. It's like, oh, Snake, you're helping us. Okay, but give me your fucking weapons. I need them for money.
I gotta sell these weapons for cryptocurrency.
Believe me, you'll understand. I felt like a dumbass afterwards, but it was still funny. But you had to basically tail this guard for a long time. I was close to the end at one attempt, and then I didn't even though they said that they would be doing road curfew checks, I saw a car go by, and I was like, okay, that's probably the last one for a while. So I'm walking on the sidewalk, right? And then another Jeep comes in, and I get shot to death. And then I'm just like, fuck this game. I hate this game. I wanted to throw my controller because I hated that part so much. Fortunately, I was able to find another soldier and I was able to make it to the goddamn church. But, that was not fun whatsoever.
Then you had that bike chase with Big Mama.
Oh.
Yeah, you didn't like it very much.
No. Like, I was replaying Metal Gear Solid 3 before this podcast, and the bike sections didn't really bother me much. Like, it's one continuous bike section, and then you fight the Shagohod, then you basically do the speeder bikes on Endor from Return of the Jedi, the last part. But I never felt like I was being overstimulated with it. This fucking bike section can go to hell because it was a fucking nightmare. I was being overstimulated to hell with this because in addition to needing to keep the vans safe, I also needed to continue my no-kill streak. But then you have these fucking vultures from Spider-Man Homecoming after my ass. In addition to all these fucking flips on the bike and shit, I'm like, God, this is starting to make me feel sick.
If there was a hedgehog with blue arms there, you would probably pass out with all the sensory overload.
God damn it. You know what? I shouldn't have been overloaded with that shit because I am a Sonic fan, but at the same time, oh god, that was not a fun section. And you told me that apparently a lot of people fucking hate this part of the game.
Yeah, Ravi Singh wrote an article about the 5 dumbest parts of Metal Gear Solid 4, and half of it is dedicated to shitting on Act 3.
Huh.
What do you think of the next act?
Act 4? It was my favorite part of the game, but not because, Shadow Moses. It was my favorite part of the game because we returned to Shadow Moses from Metal Gear Solid 1. And I know this has been criticized by some people as being shallow fan service, but Shadow Moses is in disrepair. Like, there are a lot of sections in this section that are, like, beyond repair. They even left the bloodstains during that hallway to Autocon's lab that Grey Fox used to kill all those genome soldiers. They didn't even clean the place up. And I feel like it was to make the point that Shadow Moses, much like Snake, you can't go back to the quote-unquote good old days. So, like Solid Snake, who in this game is known as Old Snake, Boomer Snake, Shadow Moses is like fucked. It doesn't have that same threat to it that it used to be. It's basically an old, rugged, damaged facility, with the only things really being there are geckos and some mini geckos or some shit.
Scarabs.
Scarabs, thank you.
Even a surveillance camera you encounter falls to the ground.
Yeah. In fact, the way this act began after the briefing section, I was actually kind of caught off guard because it's like a section from MGS1, and I was like, wait, what? What the hell happened? I thought my PlayStation turned on MGS4 MGS1 somehow. But no, it was some dream Snake had. Not to mention, I thought the finale to Act 4 was epic.
Fucking Rex versus Ray.
Metal Gear Captain Rex versus Metal Gear Ray Skywalker. Let's go.
I remember when I first played the game, I was like, no fucking way. This is too ridiculous. I love it. But, like, we actually get to pilot a Metal Gear in this game.
Yeah, and you fight another Metal Gear, which is to further reinforce the point of MGS1, because you pilot Rex, which is this old piece of shit that's basically worn down, and you fight a Metal Gear Ray, which is this new anime sleek model, and Rex beats Ray. It's kind of like how Solid Snake, the clone that had the inferior genes, was able to beat Liquid Snake, who had the superior genes.
Yeah, I enjoyed how it brought back that symbolism, but on a grander, epic scale.
Yep.
My problem with Act 4 is there's very little real gameplay to it. Like, the Scarabs are fucking annoying to sneak past, and heaven help you if you get caught by them, because they fucking swarm all over you.
Yeah, I was the victim of that.
Thankfully, Act 4 also has my favorite boss fight in the game, Crying Wolf.
Which I did not like. So, I always love one-on-one confrontations in Metal Gear games. Duels, so like Snake versus Liquid Snake at the end of MGS1, Naked Snake versus the boss from Metal Gear Solid 3, Raiden versus Solidus from Metal Gear Solid 2. So, I thought this boss would be very similar. It wasn't. Basically, what happens is you fight essentially a beefed-up Sniper Wolf XP, but you also have to deal with these, what are known as frog soldiers, and they're fucking everywhere, and it really got on my nerves because I was trying to focus on Crying Wolf, but then when I was trying to do that, I also had to make sure that I took out all the frog soldiers, and then more would come, and I was like, ugh, God, I wanted a duel.
It's interesting that you didn't like Crying Wolf that much, because your favorite boss from MGS3 was the End, and Crying Wolf is in many ways an evolution of the End.
Yeah, but the difference between the End and Crying Wolf was that with the End, there was no music, so atmosphere took huge precedence. There was this, like, I was giving a old man his final wish, which was a duel. So there was a bit more character there. You know, I say that, but the Cobra unit didn't have much character.
And Beauty and Beast has even less.
God, that was the point where I realized, wait, they don't have variations of the same backstory, do they? They do, and that's kind of why I kind of hate the B&B units. Which sucks because the first one you fight, Laughing Octopus, actually unnerved the shit out of me. And then I fight Vulture from Spider-Man Homecoming. I mean, Raging Raven, who was an okay boss fight. And I was like, this is a similar story to what Laughing Octopus went through, which makes me glad that I fucking tranked them instead of outright killing them. And then Crying Wolf had a similar story. And then Screaming Mantis also had the same story. I'm like, God damn it, man. They have the same fucking backstory. Just replace it with some details. That's it. It's kind of lame.
And the last two stories, Crying Wolf and Screaming Mantis, both involve imaginary animals.
Yeah. I remember after I beat the game, you showed me one of the Snakes 2 articles Ravi wrote, and there was a B&B generated unit, and I made my own.
Can you please read from that?
Of course I will, because this needs to be fucking heard.
Basically, what Ravi made was a series of word boxes where, okay, type in an emotion, type in an animal, such and such, and then it puts those words inside of a pre-baked story that Drebin tells you.
Okay, I found it. Groping Monkey was from the war-torn country of the United States of America. Her town was invaded by soldiers when she was a small child. They captured her and made her flying herself and her family while groping. They then fucked her and left her for dead. Out of nowhere, a monkey came and killed the soldiers by eating them. After the soldiers, it killed some pregnant women. She tried to stop it, but the monkey was unstoppable. The thing was, though, there was no monkey. She was consumed by her groping. Fighting you cleansed her soul and penis, Snake. I'm an adult.
By the way, the text box where you put in the United States of America was called Some Shit Country.
I am totally an adult.
I remember you took particular umbrage with a story detail about Screaming Mantis.
Which detail?
that she was possessed by the personality of Psycho Mantis.
Oh yeah, because I thought that was actually him controlling her the whole time.
And can you explain why you had a problem with that?
I had a problem with that because Psycho Mantis died helping Snake and Meryl get further in the Shadowmosis by unshelving a hidden bookcase, and he's like, "This is the first time I used my powers to help." So I felt like he died semi-redeemed in a way. And then when I fought Screaming Mantis and saw Psycho Mantis be like, "Look, Snake, I have PlayStation 1 techniques, but now in HD!" I was just kind of like, I thought you were good after that.
That's a common complaint, but given what's revealed later on with another character, I don't think Screaming Mantis was actually possessed by Psycho Mantis. She underwent drugs and hypnosis to take on the personality of Psycho Mantis.
Oh boy, I'm gonna hate that later.
So I don't think the intent was Psycho Mantis himself was controlling the BNBs. It's just that Screaming Mantis was brainwashed into thinking she was Psycho Mantis, and then that controlled the BNBs.
Right.
Psycho Mantis was along for the ride, don't get me wrong, but when Screaming Mantis was defeated, he wasn't like, "Cuss you, Snake! You foiled my evil plans!" He was like, "Excellent, Snake." It was just showing off his boomer PlayStation tricks that don't work anymore.
Snake, wait, you have to change the disc too. Wait, we're on PlayStation 3 hardware.
Given how pre-patch, you had to keep installing each act between acts, and the install times would take longer than simply changing the discs. As Ravi Singh said, it would be like if George W. Bush made a joke about how his father handled the Gulf War. So, then we get to Act 5, which has the least amount of gameplay. What'd you think of it?
It took me a bit to get through it, because it's like wide in the open, but it was a pretty interesting section. And then Snake goes through a fucking microwave section.
That scene was fucking brutal.
Yeah, we'll discuss that more in a bit. And then Snake has one more fight with an old man, so it's like seeing two boomers have one more fight. And then that's it! It's the end! That's it! And I think it's kind of fitting that the last chronological gameplay section is not through some stealth section or some big robot fight. It's with two old men just having one more fist fight. It's very personal.
And then you get an hour-long fucking ending.
No kidding. Although it didn't really feel like an hour. I don't know, I guess I just got used to Metal Gear Solid cutscenes by that point.
Yeah, for some reason, being lectured to about Metal Gear lore just tingles my autisms. To the point where I have difficulty sitting still during a movie and not pausing and doing something else, but these cutscenes have my full attention for some reason, even though to a normal person, they're incredibly tedious and long-winded.
I had to get the autism drenched in me after Metal Gear Solid 2.
So overall, in terms of gameplay, what do you think?
I wish I could say it was my favorite game in the series gameplay-wise, but between Act 3 and then Acts 4 and 5 being really short on gameplay, it feels like had the game been centered more around gameplay like Snake Eater was, this could have potentially beat Solid 3 for me on a gameplay perspective. I also think even with its gameplay additions, I still put it below the first Solid game. Because as much as I miss stuff like having a tranquilizer and, you know, more abilities in MGS2 onward, I feel like Metal Gear Solid 1 took better advantage of its gameplay mechanics, as dated as they are, compared to Metal Gear Solid 4.
Alright, I think that's enough for the gameplay. Now we're getting to the reason people wanted this game to exist in the first place, the revelations.
I need my answers, man. I hate ambiguity, dude bros be like.
Yeah, so let's get the elephant in the room out of the way. This is what Kojima said regarding answering every question under the sun in the series. Once again, I had intended for Metal Gear Solid 3 to wrap up the series, but so many people wanted to know what happened after MGS2. Things like the identity of the Patriots and so forth. I had planned on leaving those mysteries as mysteries, but people weren't convinced that the series was wrapped up. So ultimately, we ended up making Metal Gear Solid 4. And boy, you can fucking tell Kojima didn't intend to answer any of this.
To the people who don't like this game is like the biggest monkey's paw to ever exist.
No, there's a myth going around that even I have spread in the past, where Kojima was sent death threats to answer all the questions in Metal Gear Solid 2. That's not necessarily the case. After Metal Gear Solid 3, Kojima always intended to write and produce Metal Gear Solid 4. He just wanted to hand off directorial duties to someone else. So he was still in charge of the story, but he wanted his protege, Shuyo Murata, to take a stab at directing. So the reason I'm bringing that up is people say that Kojima had to answer Metal Gear Solid 2's questions because he got death threats. But even before the death threats, he was still going to write the story. He got death threats over the fact that he didn't want to direct, which is still a shitty fucking thing to do. You know, don't send anyone death threats.
Yeah, like, this is over stuff that's fictional. I'm not saying that as a way to say it's fiction, who gives a shit. I'm saying that as a means of, like, there are more important things in the world. You know, fiction could be important to you, but never go full dumbass and fucking send death threats over this shit.
Right. So yeah, that's another thing Star Wars and Metal Gear have in common. Shitty fucking fan bases.
And Ruby, which we'll get to. Oh, believe me.
So as we mentioned in our Metal Gear Solid 2 episode, there is a gentleman by the name of Mr. Wolf. He articulated the Metal Gear Solid 2 VR theory, where everything that took place in the game was part of a VR simulation that Raiden went through. You know, that's why he fought Metal Gear Ray on top of the VR mission's photo mode stage.
I mean, technically, if you think about it, MGS2 was a simulation. It's called a video game.
Yeah, that's the thing. Every Metal Gear game is technically a virtual reality game from the perspective of the player.
Yeah.
So, regardless of whatever Metal Gear Solid 4 establishes, the VR theory still holds up. In fact, one of the bonus features of the limited edition of Metal Gear Solid 4 had a history of the series documentary, and it's all done by this narrator who sounds like a fucking dude bro. It's like, Metal Gear Solid revolutionized gaming forever. You know, that kind of narrator.
Oh, that, like, fake pop culture geek. Guys, we totally know about geek culture shit.
It wasn't really that, it was just like, it sounded like a TMC narrator. Or the E! Entertainment Channel. But, funnily enough, this documentary, 20 Years of Metal Gear, actually said something fucking profound.
What's that?
When it covered Metal Gear Solid 2, the guy was like, and then later on in the game, Raiden realizes that he's actually a character within a Metal Gear Solid game. So, it's like, this is the closest thing to an official acknowledgement of the VR theory that's available to mainstream audiences. So Mr. Wolf was very upset about Metal Gear Solid 4 and how it handled the various mysteries and plot threads from MGS2. And he came up with the idea that Kojima intended to self-sabotage his answers for these mysteries, to further emphasize that these mysteries were never meant to be answered in the first place. So, for example, the most infamous explanation for something that happened in Metal Gear Solid 2 was Vamp's immortality. In Metal Gear Solid 2, it could be inferred that whenever Vamp touches water, that's how he gets revived. You know, when Fortune's tear drops on Vamp's cheek, he comes back to life, and then he drowns in non-buoyant water. Then he comes back later on to fucking kill Emma, and then Raiden shoots him in the head a couple times till he falls into the ocean. But then, at the end of the game, while Raiden is throwing away his dog tags, if you hold down the triangle button, you can see a texture of Vamp in the background. So yeah, he's still alive. And every time he died, he was touched by water. So people speculated that the way Vamp was revived was whenever he got in contact with water. And some say that this has to do with baptism, because when you're baptized, you're considered a new man. It's kind of like a rebirth. But then Metal Gear Solid 4 comes along and just says, nah, it's nanomachines, son. And this is after Metal Gear Solid 3 had paramedic shit all over Naked Snake for being such a Debbie Downer, no fun allowed asshole when it comes to movies.
I mean, if I gave a shit about Vamp, I would be pretty annoyed by that explanation, but I didn't give a shit about him, so I was just like, okay?
Sure, but for those who did give a shit, It's like nanomachines were already fucking overused by that point in the game to explain everything.
It's like the Force.
It's like midichlorians.
Okay, that's a better analogy.
And then there's the big one. The biggest mystery of Metal Gear Solid 2 was the Patriots. Who are they? Who created them? What are they like today? Because last we heard, the founders of the Patriots were all dead 100 years ago. Metal Gear Solid 3 kind of answers this by saying that the names on the list of the Patriots Wiseman Committee were actually the members of the Philosophers, the organization that preceded the Patriots. But it still didn't really explain who the Patriots were. Now, Metal Gear Solid 2 did hint that the current Patriots are AIs, but didn't answer who started the organization that created the AIs. And that's what Metal Gear Solid 4 tries to address. And it does so by saying that the radio contacts from Metal Gear Solid 3 were actually the main villains of the series. Major Zero, the James Bond-loving commanding officer of Operation Snake Eater, created his own Spectre organization. And for people who were mixed about the game until that point, this kind of killed the game for them.
Which is interesting for me because my reaction to that was complete indifference. I think I remember you because I played this game with you and you listened to me play it. I think you were a bit surprised by my reaction.
Yeah, because if you listen to our Ruby Volume 3 episode, I was like, oh, just wait till you play Metal Gear Solid 4 and learn who the main villain of the series is. You'll laugh. And it turns out you took it in stride.
I guess. The thing with me is that I didn't exactly have a strong connection to the Metal Gear Solid 3 radio contacts. Not to say I didn't like them. In fact, part of the reason why I replayed Metal Gear Solid 3 was just so I could hear them speak a bit more. So I contacted Major Zero more, I contacted Paramedic more, I contacted Sigurd more. And even with that, I was still kind of like, I can kind of see why they became the Patriots, why Major Zero started them in the first place.
You were looking for evidence that Paramedic was possibly transgender.
No, I wasn't really looking for that. I was looking more for like, okay, I want to care more about these guys, and I kind of do, but at the same time, I'm like, yeah, I can totally see these guys becoming the Patriots. I think Metal Gear Solid 3 showed these characters at their most optimistic, but then, like with Big Boss, at the end of the game, they start to eventually change as people, and both Big Boss and Major Zero had different interpretations of what the boss wanted. Big Boss wanted soldiers to have a place in the world, whereas Major Zero wanted to unite the world under one vision, neither of which the boss was making the point of. So even after playing Metal Gear Solid 3, I was like, yeah, I can believe it. I think this is the main example of, had I followed the series for years, I probably would have been pissed off by this revelation, but I like to think about things and their intentions. I would probably come to reconcile, yeah, this works, but I still don't like it. Here, though, I'm like, yeah, this works, but I don't really care.
There is a call with Sigint where he talks about how he was discriminated against for being black, but he notes that Major Zero isn't like that. He foresees a world where electronics will dominate everything, hence signal intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
So, there is a loose basis for Major Zero becoming a technocrat.
Yeah, because when you start Operation Snake Eater, he's like, who are the Patriots, and Lalilelo. I mean, granted, you could make the argument, a very strong argument, that, well, that doesn't really mean that much in the grand scheme of things. I'm not even making the argument that it was foreshadowed, well, I'm just saying, yeah, I can see Major Zero going down this path.
Originally, it was meant to poke fun at people who wanted to know who the Patriots were. Because, Naked Snake keeps asking Eva, who are the Patriots? And Eva won't fucking answer. Just like how fans kept asking, who are the Patriots? And Kojima's like, nah.
Go outside, you idiots.
But now that scene takes on a whole new meaning, where it's like, oh, okay, so maybe he's had this shit on his mind for a while.
Yeah.
At the same time, though, if you're going to undo Metal Gear Solid 2's ambiguity, you have to replace it with something compelling enough to exceed fan speculation. Like, for decades, people thought the idea of a Blade Runner sequel was sacrilege. And so Blade Runner 2049 had to be so good that people were able to let go of their reservations and accept this film as the follow-up to Blade Runner's kind of ambiguous ending. Making the funny people from Snake Eater, the Patriots, doesn't do that.
I imagine.
And that's why many people are pissed off, because not only was Metal Gear Solid 2's ambiguity undone, it was undone in the most spiteful way imaginable.
I didn't really see it as spiteful, but that's probably because I didn't have that same history with Metal Gear like some of these other people did. So what they see as spiteful, I just see as just a part of the story.
Now, the next revelation, I know, struck a nerve with you.
Oh my god, we're talking about this part, are we?
Yep.
Oh.
So in Metal Gear Solid 2, Ocelot grafted Liquid's right arm to himself for some reason.
And then he became Cam Clark.
Yep. And it's like, dude, what the fuck are you doing?
Well, you see, brother, I'm trying to do my best Leonardo impression.
It's like, okay, Kojima, I understand that Liquid Snake was popular, but number one, bringing him back is stupid, and number two, the way you brought him back is unbelievably stupid.
True, yeah.
Then Metal Gear Solid 3 comes out, and it's revealed that Ocelot's father was a spirit medium. You know, he's the son of the boss and the Sorrow. So it's like, okay, so it's not completely out of nowhere.
Bullshit, it was still out of nowhere. Kojima just had to make it look like it wasn't.
Well, okay. He retroactively made it more acceptable, I should say.
There you go.
But so to explain why the fuck Ocelot put Liquid's arm on himself, like, what is his motivation? And what was his motivation to keep his fucking arm, even after knowing that Liquid was trying to possess him?
Well, you see, having two arms to beat your dick with is better than having one arm.
Yeah, beating his dick to Big Boss, apparently.
Hey man, that man is a sexy motherfucker, okay?
So then Metal Gear Solid 4 comes along, and it explains why Ocelot would want to grab Liquid's arm to his own. And it turns out, it was just to fool the Patriots into thinking that he was being possessed by Liquid. Yeah, it turns out he was never really possessed by Liquid, he just brainwashed himself into thinking he was Liquid.
Okay. I fucking hate this revelation, but not because... No, not the Liquid Snake. It's because it's just really that... It almost killed that last fist fight, which I was enthusiastically positive about. But then knowing that afterwards, I'm just like, what? Really? Bro, that is awful. Hated that shit. I actually almost had a violent reaction to that. That's how much I hated it. So, the shit with the Patriots didn't piss me off, but this did. I don't know what that says about me.
Yeah, every critically thinking Metal Gear fan has at least one explanation that they get pissed off about in this game.
What was your one that you got pissed off over?
When Snake, for some reason, was surprised that he and Liquid weren't 100% a genetic match. And it's like, yeah, that was the point. Liquid thought you had the better genes, he thought he had the shitty genes. That was the whole point. And then Naomi said, oh yeah, and this is why Foxeye only affected Liquid and spared you. And it's like, no, you didn't have to explain that. The point was, Snake's fate wasn't defined by his genetic code. It was just how he chose to live life. You didn't have to explain why he survived being infected with Foxeye.
I mean, I didn't care about that either. Because a lot of the things that got explained in this game were shit that I didn't really give a shit about. Because I'm not one of those Spurgs who likes to know every single piece of lore. I'm more of a character and themes person.
So you're not a lore guru?
No.
Which is a term I've actually seen used by people unironically on shit like GameFAQs.
No, not at all. I mean, I know lore, but I don't make that my main focus. Because at that point, you're just knowing facts, which You're knowing facts, but you're not knowing why things are the way they are. You're not looking deeper into this shit.
You don't understand the sense behind these facts.
Essentially, yeah.
You only know the words, not the meaning behind the words.
Exactly.
So, anything else you have to say about the Liquid Ocelot twist?
No, I fucking hate it, and I wish it wasn't in the game.
I mean, Ocelot's plan could have worked while still being possessed by a liquid. Ocelot's plan was to reverse engineer an Outer Heaven uprising in order to get the Patriots to repeat their patterns, send Stake in to stop him, and then he tweaks enough variables so that he would make it so that the Patriots would be their own undoing. Like, the Patriots didn't expect Fox Alive to wipe them out entirely. But there's a way to do that without overly convoluting past entries in the series. Because now people are like, well, why does he have Kane Clark's voice in Metal Gear Solid 2, then? Why is he only voiced by Patrick Zimmerman in MGS4?
Well, you see, it's because I did my worst Leonardo impression and got kicked out in the recording studio.
Some people have said that Liquid possessed Ocelot in MGS2, but in Metal Gear Solid 4 it was fake. In Metal Gear Saga Volume 1, which is a special DVD documentary, Kojima acknowledges that he plans on explaining some of the shit from Metal Gear Solid 2, and he singles out that, people thought that Liquid possessing Ocelot is absurd. I plan on explaining that, and the only explanation we got was psychotherapy and nanomachines, son. So...
Nanomachines is Metal Gear Solid 4's favorite thing, and the game will let you know damn well that it loves them.
I was so happy that I was finally able to show you that Metal Gear Solid 4 in a nutshell video.
It's just nanomachines. That's all there is. It's just nanomachines.
If there's ever a Metal Gear archive of different interviews and videos, MGS4 as a nutshell should be part of the Metal Gear Library of Congress. As an important piece of the Metal Gear community, because that video perfectly encapsulates how people feel about this game.
It's all just nanomachines.
A lot of people say that, Ocelot is actually the true hero of the series, because he wanted to destroy the Patriots. I don't know about that one, Chief. He almost killed Sunny Gerlukovich back when she was still in Olga's womb. Sunny was essential to completing Fox Alive. In fact, she was essential to completing Fox Alive in such a way that the Patriots would be destroyed, but society would remain intact. When Liquid Ocelot died, he was like, soon the world will descend into chaos. No law, no order. The people will fight, and through battle they'll know the fullness of life. At last our Father's will, his outer heaven, is complete. So, we're lucky that Olga survived the Tinker incident and went on to have Sunny, who went on to both stop the Patriots and prevent Outer Heaven.
What? A little girl was able to save the world? That's some bullshit. What is this SJW trash?
There's some people who have an issue with a little girl writing the virus that saves the world. It's common in Japanese media to have super brilliant kids in them.
I also see it as the next generation stopping the cycle.
Yeah, exactly. And even in Metal Gear Solid 2, if you call the Colonel AI, he explains Emma's backstory, and apparently she was involved in some big hacking incident around the turn of the century, which would be when she was in her early teens. So it's not unprecedented. And then there's the big one. I remember when the credits first started rolling, I asked you, so what'd you think about the ending?
Oh yeah. And then I see the words Big Boss. I'm like, what? Big Boss?
Yep, Big Boss is back, baby. For a little bit.
Somehow, Big Boss returned.
Well, whereas The Rise of Skywalker leaves Palpatine's return as something you have to infer, Big Boss goes into excruciating detail how he returned.
Nanomachines.
Yeah, that's part of it.
This, it's if you had to give a test on Metal Gear Solid 4, it'd be the easiest goddamn test ever, because every fucking question's answer would be nanomachines.
Did I ever tell you about the original ending for Metal Gear Solid 4?
No, I don't think you have.
Alright, so originally, Kojima's idea was Snake and Otacon would turn themselves into the authorities and then be executed.
Can you explain the intent behind that?
The idea was Snake and Otacon were fighting for justice, and so they turned themselves in, and then have the authorities give justice to them. Because after the Tinker incident, they were considered eco-terrorists.
I don't like that ending idea.
And neither did his team. He had to be talked out of it. So, there's this idea that Kojima, after Metal Gear Solid 3, became so high on his own supply that he could never take criticism, and he surrounded himself with a bunch of yes-men who adore his every word. So, now that we have this information out in the open, I want everyone who argued that to meet up with Kojima, bend down on their knees, and kiss his ass to apologize.
Pretty dramatic standing.
Just like Randy Marsh kissed Jesse Jackson's ass in that South Park episode.
Yeah, the one with the friend word.
Naggers.
Yeah, that's it.
I'm sick of people who either think Kojima is perfect in every way and can do no wrong, he's like a god, and those who, as a knee-jerk reaction to those types, try to tear Kojima down whenever they can, even if it doesn't make any sense. Like, there's this theory that, the reason Metal Gear Solid 1 to 3 was so good was because of Tomokazu Fukushima. He's the real brains behind the project. Kojima just took all the fame and glory for himself. But then you actually read interviews with Fukushima, and it's like, all he did was write the optional codec conversations. Keyword is optional. The mandatory cutscenes and codec conversations were all Kojima.
Man, I love it when people try to push their own shitty narratives.
So, like, if you're going to blame anything for Metal Gear Solid 4 on Fukushima's absence, it should be the fact that Metal Gear Solid 4 doesn't have as much of a expansive codec support.
Yeah, all you get are Otacon and Rose.
You're very happy to see Rose again.
Yes, I was, which I know to some Metal Gear fans labels me as the Antichrist because of it. Like, what? You liked Rose, you cuck? And I'm like, I'm sorry if I connected with this character in Metal Gear Solid 2. Sorry if I fucking empathized and sympathized with her in that game due to my own experiences.
What do you think of the fact that she pretended to marry Campbell in order to protect her and Jack's son?
Well, she had her reasons, and yeah, you can argue that it was the wrong thing to do, but like, she did it just to avoid the Patriots.
Another thing is, people seem to be under the impression that Rose directly lied to Raiden about having a miscarriage. But she said she wanted to tell Raiden. And I hate to use the Metal Gear Solid 4 database to support my argument, but apparently, Raiden learned about Rose's marriage to Campbell and her miscarriage secondhand from an old U.S. Army buddy. That is, if you trust the database, which, even before Peace Walker and Metal Gear Solid 5 was already dubious. But in this case, I think it makes sense.
Yeah.
But anyway, back to the new ending with Big Boss. What'd you think?
I can understand the criticism that some people may find it redundant because, well, Snake was already told to live life the way he wanted to at the end of Metal Gear Solid 1. Why does Big Boss need to reiterate this to him? To which I would argue that this scene was important because Big Boss ultimately realizes what the boss ultimately wanted, which was Earth to remain the way it was. It wasn't, so soldiers can have their own, outer haven or whatever, or have the world be ruled under one unifying vision. It was just to leave the world the way it was. And he ultimately realizes this before he dies. And I see it as a way for Snake to forgive his father, because this game has a lot of father relationships, like with Campbell and Merrill, because of their falling out, and now we have Snake and Big Boss here. In a way, it makes the ending of Metal Gear 2 come full circle, because in that game, he more or less kind of cursed Snake to the mindset of, he's always destined to be a soldier. But now here he is telling Snake that to live his final days as a man, not a soldier.
He even tells Snake, had you been in my place back then, maybe you wouldn't have made the same mistakes that I did. He's basically confessing that Snake was the better man all along.
Yeah. You know what Solid Snake was? Solid Snake, despite his darker moments, never went down the dark path Big Boss did. But keep in mind, Solid Snake had the recessive genes, the inferior ones. So the fact that not only did he not let his genetic fate define him, but also ended up being better than the most legendary soldier of the 20th century, it's like, god damn, this man's a fucking king.
For a while, I wish we got an ending where Snake killed himself in order to stop Foxdie from spreading. I thought it would be a heroic ending. But the more I thought about it, Snake's arc isn't, oh, he's the greatest hero of all time. He does everything perfectly. Snake's arc is he learns to value his life and become more human. He started out as a man-made monster, but he becomes gradually more human. So him not being able to go through with killing himself, now granted he had a clip, to his understanding, he knows that he eventually has to off himself to stop Foxdie. But even so, the fact that he struggles with it shows his inner humanity. And so, when Big Boss tells him that, okay, Drebin's Foxdie is preventing the old Foxdie from spreading, you don't have to kill yourself anymore. You can live the rest of your life in peace now. This is what Snake's arc is. It's not him being the greatest hero ever. It's him being a man.
Yeah, he's no longer a soldier. He doesn't have to fight anymore. He can live the rest of his days as a man. Probably something he always wanted to do.
The Metal Gear 2 parallel you mentioned really makes me appreciate MGS4's ending a lot more than I did in my flip-flop years, you could say. Because now it brings the saga full circle. Big Boss realizes that he made a mistake, and it was his inferior clone that fixed all of his mistakes. And so he lifts his curse of condemning Snake to die like a dog on the battlefield, and tells him to live the rest of his life, not as a snake, but as a man. Really, it's the only logical way for Snake's story to end. And I love how after the credits, Otacon tries to give him a pack of smokes, and Snake's like, nah, these things will kill ya. So now he's regained his love of life that he told Big Boss, and he's going to relish it for as long as he can.
Yeah, that's why I say Metal Gear Solid 4 is ultimately not a waste of time, like its detractors say that it is. I can understand why it would come off as initially redundant, but if you look further into it, there's a bit more to it that makes it distinct from previous games.
And now there's other oddities within the game. For example, Johnny Sasaki went from being a joke character to the one who gets the girl in the end.
And I'm also a unicorn because not only am I the only person on the planet who played the MSX games before Metal Gear Solid 1, I also am the only person who liked that, apparently.
Yeah, HubPie is Johnny Sasaki's only fan.
Okay, I should stress that it's not something I'm going to die on a hill on. It's just that when you told me that I was the only one who liked Johnny's heel turn, I was like, really? Okay. Because I feel like, in some ways, Johnny going from the haha funny shits man to Meryl's love interest, I feel like that's just, you don't define a person based off their worst qualities, you base them off their defining moments. And to me, Johnny's defining moment was him saving Meryl from drowning at the end of Act 3. Granted, when I first saw that, I was kind of a bit confused, but then Act 5 cleared it up a little bit more for me.
And also upset Johnny suspiciously looks like a younger Snake.
Brother, it is I, Liquid... Wait, this is not Liquid Snake.
He's Gaseous Snake.
I was wondering when we would get Gaseous Snake.
So it's been said that Meryl doesn't really like Solid Snake. She likes the idea of Solid Snake. So Johnny is more akin to the Solid Snake Meryl had in her mind.
You think that makes Meryl a bitch? As I personally don't think it does.
I don't think so. It's like, apparently Snake and Meryl tried after Shadow Moses, and it didn't really work out. Because, the reality doesn't live up to the legend. Whereas Johnny seems to be more like the kind of guy Meryl wanted, where he's both brave, but also not afraid to show his sensitive side. I knew you would like Johnny because you're a big fan of Jean Arc from Ruby.
Yeah, Jean's kind of similar, although Jean doesn't shit himself. There's a scene at the beginning of Volume 4 that I think encapsulates him pretty well, that we'll get to.
So since you're Johnny's only fan, would he subscribe to his OnlyFans?
No.
You're right, it's probably full of scat anyway.
Yeah, that's why. Yeah, exactly. Again, this isn't something I'm gonna die on a hill for, it's just, I'm gonna take my opinion on that with stride.
What do you think about Naomi Hunter?
She starts off as an evil bitch, but then she becomes queen.
I know, right?
I know that sounds cringe as fuck, but she kind of starts off at a similar place, like when we learned that she hated Snake at MGS1. We save her, but then she defects to Liquid Ocelot, but it turns out that she ends up saving the world. Kind of like what her brother, Grey Fox, did at the end of MGS1.
Yeah, it's weird. Like, to me, Naomi Hunter is Metal Gear Solid 4's MV-fucking-P, but a lot of people fucking hate her. Like, just the other day, I saw someone saying, "Oh, Naomi's the worst, she killed Snake." I think this person thinks that Fox Die is why Solid Snake is aging so rapidly, but there's a whole scene that explains, no, Fox Die has nothing to do with why Snake is aging. That's just how his genes work.
Yeah.
And also there's scenes like when Naomi was caressing Vamp's chest, acting like the villain's top bitch. But in retrospect, I felt that was her acting. I don't know, I liked that she initially hated Snake in MGS1, but as she grew to understand Snake and how he hated himself about how he killed Grey Fox and Big Boss, just as much as she hated him, she learned to let go of her hatred, to the point where in her final recording, she's like, "Snake, hear me. Our country is a free child once more." So even when Snake thinks that Naomi still hated him about what he did to Grey Fox, like there's that great scene in Shadow Moses where Snake's like, "Naomi hated what they did to Frank's body, but it was me who crippled him in the first place. She must have hated me too." It shows that he's still tormented by everything that happened. But now, with that message, knowing what her intentions were all along, after Shadow Moses, she never hated Snake. She had to pretend she was on Liquid's side in order to make sure the plan worked. But now that the Patriots are gone, her final message can tell the truth. And so I imagine Snake has this sense of completeness now that Naomi has forgiven him about what he's done. And so maybe he can forgive himself then. I'll be honest, I cried during Naomi's final message.
It was a pretty powerful scene.
It was the first time a video game ever made me cry.
What? Video games made you cry? Wow, you're a bitch. Also, Otacon loses another woman he loves again. Poor bastard. But one thing I like is that he gets over it quickly because he's like, we have a job to do. So he's not letting her sacrifice go in vain.
I'm done crying. I don't have any more tears to shed. It's like Snake's strength rubs off on him. Now, granted, he cries the next day, but that's only after the mission's complete.
Yeah, man, let Otacon cry.
Yeah.
There's no shame in it.
So I think we've covered the surface level plot as much as we can.
Yep.
Now let's get into the meta stuff.
Oh boy.
And to me, this is the real meat of the game because it's impossible to talk about Metal Gear Solid 4 without discussing Kojima's thought process going into this game. So as I mentioned before, Kojima said he had no intention of answering the mysteries of Metal Gear Solid 2, but fans kept annoying him about it. So he finally decided to make it. This is a quote from Kojima. "When work started on Metal Gear Solid 4, though, I began to wonder if my message of what we should pass on to future generations had truly gone through, both to players and my team. However, it hit me that maybe there are some things you can't pass on. A person's will, thoughts, and emotions aren't encoded in genes, and they aren't a part of memes either. If you group together those remaining factors, you're left with a person's sense." And that's the theme of the game this time around. So by sense, what Kojima means is mentality. So for example, both Outer Heaven and the Patriots are completely opposite ideals. One is global chaos, the other is global control. However, both stem from the same source, the boss's will. Big Boss is a soldier, so he interpreted the boss's will from a soldier's perspective. Major Zero was a commander who believed that technology and signal intelligence was the future, and so they both filtered the boss's message in their own brains. That's like a kind of confirmation bias. They would emphasize some parts of what the boss said, and either de-emphasize or ignore others.
Gee, that sounds very familiar.
How so?
You were talking to me about how someone read one of your articles on the snake soup and quoted your article in some aspects, but then ignored other parts of it.
Oh yeah! So, I wrote an article for the Snake Soup called Myth. Hideo Kojima said that Portable Ops and Metal Gear Rising are canonical. So I linked that to someone who said that Metal Gear Rising is a sequel to MGS4, and I quoted a part where Kojima said, well, Rising is set after MGS4, so in that sense, it is a continuation of the saga. On the other hand, it's Platinum's interpretation of the saga and their interpretation of the Metal Gear world. So in that sense, you could say it's a parallel story as well as a continuation. So he's tiptoeing around the issue, but it's very clear that, at the very least, he doesn't want to give a straight answer about it, because if he did, he would probably piss off marketing. But when he was on his way out anyway, after Konami's 2015 restructuring where Kojima was going to leave the company at the end of the year, he was like, okay, fuck this shit. Here's all the games that are part of the saga. Metal Gear 1, 2, MGS 1, 2, 3, 4, Peace Walker, and 5. They all form a single Metal Gear Saga. Nothing else. Fuck you. So this one fucker took the part where Kojima said Rising is set after MGS4 and said, oh, the article itself has Kojima saying Rising takes place after MGS4. Therefore, it's canon. It's like, there's a whole other article that you didn't read. I recommend reading all of that before replying, please.
Well, I can't read. Get out of here.
I'm going to link to that article in the description. If you read it and accept it, great. If you don't, whatever. It's true no matter what you think. But anyway, so Metal Gear Solid 4 basically reframes the entire saga as a war between two fanboys of the boss, bickering over which one understands her better.
God, this just sounds like my typical Spider-Man fan arguments. Believe me, I will talk about that one day on this podcast. Oh boy, will I.
There was nothing left of Stan Lee and Steve Ditko's will in their struggle. Only bitter hatred, a passion to destroy one another.
It's not quite like that, if at all, but still. Anyway, back on topic.
The biggest allegory in Metal Gear Solid 4 is with Old Snake and Kojima himself. This is from the documentary Hideo Kojima's Gene, included in the special edition Blu-ray of Metal Gear Solid 4. This is the narrator speaking. The main character of the game is Old Snake, an aged and frazzled Solid Snake. Kojima projected part of himself onto Snake, continues to fight despite his age. And in an interview, Kojima was asked, would you say Old Snake has the same mindset as you? To which Kojima says, yeah, I'd say so. We're both old, but we both think we have nice asses for our age. Laughs. And of course, when Kojima left, Solid Snake's perfect ass was neutered in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate.
Well, at least Snake fucking returned in his glory, along with a bitchin' remix of the theme of Solid Snake for Metal Gear 2.
But is it really Snake in his glory without his glorious ass?
So what, is this the Nightwing conundrum? If he doesn't have a perfect ass, it's not Nightwing?
Exactly.
You drive a hard bargain there.
So this is another controversial thing about Metal Gear Solid 4, how it portrays Solid Snake, the man, the myth, the legend. They say that in Metal Gear Solid 2, he's optimistic about the future, whereas in Metal Gear Solid 4, he's a lot more cynical, and they see this as a betrayal of his character development.
Not my Snake.
Yeah, it's very similar to how people bitch about Luke Skywalker not tearing up Dark Troopers in The Last Jedi.
Well, okay, to be a bit more sympathetic, I could kind of understand that perspective up to a certain point of the game. Because, yeah, when I played this game, I noticed that Snake was a bit more pessimistic compared to how he was in MGS2. You know, I attribute that to his aging and what he learns about his body from Naomi. I can give him a pass on that, even if that's not exactly what I expected from Snake at this point. But then the microwave bit happened, and I'm like, okay, I think by this point, the argument of he's not my Solid Snake kind of starts to crack a bit. Like, sure, you can argue that it's not what Solid Snake should be for the first few opening bits of the game, but afterwards, it becomes harder and harder to really kind of justify that mindset, I believe.
Going back to Mr. Wolf as part of his Metal Gear Solid 4 sabotage argument, he notes that Kojima made a parallel between himself and Old Snake, and so this is what he said. Snake is apathetic because Kojima is apathetic. Snake is tired because Kojima is tired. Snake gave up on his philosophical idealism because Kojima gave up on his philosophical idealism. What do you think of that?
I can kind of get where he's coming from, because on the surface, Metal Gear Solid 4 does feel a lot more cynical compared to something like Metal Gear Solid 2, given the way that game ends. But even then, Snake still tries to help Raiden with his trauma. That's why he goes through the microwave in the first place. In addition, he still tries to finish the mission of taking down Liquid Ocelot. Because, yeah, it's more cynical, but, like, it's not completely downer. I'd argue Metal Gear Solid 4 ends on a rather optimistic note.
And I think that's Mr. Wolf's blind spot when he looks at Old Snake in regards to Kojima and Metal Gear Solid 4. He's focused on the cynical aspects, and, you know, they are there. Vamp being powered by nanomachines was definitely a fuck you.
Mm-hmm.
And Kojima's aware that nanomachines are stupid. Like, his idea for Metal Gear Rising 2 was one where Gray Fox would fight zombies powered by nanomachines. You have anything to say to that?
No, I think it speaks for itself.
Believe it or not, a lot of people took what Kojima said at face value, to the point where when Kojima was reacting to Metal Gear Survive, and he was like, where do zombies fit into Metal Gear? People were like, but you suggested that zombies be included in the Metal Gear Rising sequel.
Look how they massacred my boy.
And it's like, okay, yeah, he proposed a goofy sequel to a game that he doesn't consider canon.
Yeah.
But anyway, back to the main topic. Mr. Wolf is so close to getting it right with the Kojima Old Snake parallel, but he misses some very key details, both in that interview he keeps citing and in the game itself. Continuing on from that interview I mentioned before, Kojima was asked, do you think sense can't truly be passed on? This is Kojima's answer. I think that even though you might not be able to describe something in words, it's important to show it indirectly. No matter how often a parent tells their child that they shouldn't misbehave, or that they should smarten up, the child usually doesn't listen, do they? So I had Snake, who continues to fight despite his age. It's like a father going out and working hard every day to provide for his child, rather than simply telling them he loves them. In the game, Meryl and other characters tell Old Snake he doesn't have to fight, that they'll take over for him. But Snake continues to fight. That's what he wants to pass on. Of course, they may not realize it while he's still alive. What'd you think of that?
Yeah, I can see that.
It's the missing piece of the Kojima Old Snake parallel that Mr. Wolf just refuses to acknowledge for some reason.
Because it doesn't fit with his beliefs. That, or he was so thoroughly burned by the way Snake was portrayed that he just can't separate himself from that, which is something I personally really hate seeing. Because it just kind of makes me unsympathetic to your argument, and unfortunately makes me very annoyed when talking with people about stuff I like, and they just refuse to consider more pieces that contradict their points.
Yeah, like, if Snake was truly apathetic and didn't care about what was going on, he wouldn't have tried to help Raiden get back on the right path.
Yeah.
And that's another parallel. In Metal Gear Solid 2, people hated Raiden for being a flamboyant girly man, rather than the rugged badass that they wanted to play as.
He's not my snake. I want to play with my snake.
Go play with your other snake, dipshit.
No, but I want my manly snake and make my snake feel good.
So for Metal Gear Solid 4, it seemed like Kojima was conceding to the Raiden critics. He made him a badass cyborg ninja who spins around Gecko and has subtly gay ballerina fights with Vamp.
That's what it seems on the surface. But then you see how it actually affects him, and this guy is fucking suffering.
Yeah, in becoming cool, Raiden was robbed of his humanity. Ninja Raiden is meant to be a parody of player demands.
But that flew over people's heads and they saw, ooh, cool ninja.
It's just to show the cost of doing what other people want you to be, rather than just being yourself. Raiden is only truly happy when he's with his family, when he's not doing that cool Platinum Games bullshit. And in fact, there's a moment in the Act 4 briefing where Snake tells Raiden, 5 years ago, that's not what I meant. Which may as well have come from Hideo Kojima's mouth. It's a commentary on how fans misunderstood Metal Gear Solid 2. But if Kojima and Snake were truly apathetic about trying to pass down their message still, Snake wouldn't have tried to reiterate his message to Raiden. The reason he stopped Raiden from going through the microwave hall is because he wanted to tell Raiden that even with all the tragedies in his life, even with the additional tragedies after the Big Shell incident, the Patriots turning him into a cyborg ninja, he shouldn't throw away his life. He still has his youth, and he shouldn't waste it. And to me, that shows that not only is Snake not apathetic, he still cares about the future, but it shows to me that even with all the concessions he made to the Dude Bros with Metal Gear Solid 4, deep down, he's still trying to subvert what the Dude Bros want. Oh, you want to know why Vamp's immortal? Nanomachines, fuck you. But the core message that he wants to convey, he still wants to keep that intact. And that's why Raiden's ending in Metal Gear Solid 4 is pretty much the same ending that he got in Metal Gear Solid 2. Because, yeah, Kojima undid Raiden's ending in 2, but only to make his meta point about how players misunderstood MGS2. And since Raiden's the player, you need to take that allegory into account. But once he was done with his point, he put Raiden back where he belonged, in the loving embrace of his family. Fuck Rising.
Yeah, speaking as someone who was a big fan of Metal Gear Solid 2 and Raiden as a character, I was okay with what they did because, again, it was there to make a point about Raiden and people who didn't understand MGS2 at the time. I can understand if you really loved Metal Gear Solid 2 and you just see this shit and you're like, fuck, Kojima lost his integrity. But then you actually play it and you're like, okay, there is actually a point to it. I was ultimately okay with what they did with Raiden because he got his happy ending again at the end. And again, Snake is such a fucking Chad to Raiden that when Raiden was gonna go through the microwave to stop the Patriots AI, Snake was like, no, you still have your youth, your heart, it's human. And then he decides to go through that microwave.
That reminds me, so on Metal Gear Solid, the unofficial site, someone made a thread asking, Solid Snake said that Raiden's heart is human, but actually, if you look at the database, it said that the only part of Raiden's original body that remained was his head and spinal cord.
That's not what they mean, you dipshit.
It's an allegory.
Did this guy have autism or something?
I have no idea, but he definitely exhibits an autistic-like mentality when it comes to an allegory-heavy series like Metal Gear.
Yeah, you have to train yourself to understand these things.
And one of the things that really annoyed me about Mr. Wolf's latest book, A Stealth Game, The Kojima Code Part 2, was how he tried to discredit Project Ito, who was one of Kojima's closest confidants. I believe he's the one who coined the term Kojima fundamentalist, which is what I identify as.
And I do not identify myself as anything in regards to this series because I don't like to label myself a certain type of fan. Because then that just limits people's perspective on me. It's like, oh, you consider yourself a sequel trilogy fan. That means you must only like the sequel trilogy. No, I don't just like the sequel trilogy. Like, you get what I mean?
I'll explain what I mean by Kojima fundamentalists in another podcast. It doesn't mean that I think everything Kojima touches turns to gold.
No, I know. I'm just asking. You get what I'm saying, right?
I get it.
Okay, yeah. I wasn't implying that you only like Kojima stuff.
Right. Or that I think Kojima can do no wrong.
Yeah, I already knew that. I wasn't saying that to assume anything.
Right. So, for those who don't know, Project Ito was one of the few people who understood Metal Gear Solid 2 when it first released, and this really helped Kojima through his depression. In fact, as he made a new game, he would always think, how would Project Ito react to this? And so after Ito wrote Genocidal Organ, his first original novel, Kojima was so impressed by it that he would commission Ito to write a novelization of Metal Gear Solid 4, but in doing so also summarize the entire saga. The beginning of each act explains the backstory of a different character. And so as you read this novelization of MGS4, you're also learning about the series as a whole. And the way it portrays Old Snake is very different from how Mr. Wolf interprets him, as someone who's given up on life and is just going through the motions. Now, Mr. Wolf is someone who very much emphasizes Kojima's intentions above all else as a way to inform how we view these games. And don't get me wrong, Mr. Wolf has had a great impact on how I view these games. But again, he has these blind spots, and even when directed towards where he can shine a light on these blind spots, he still tries to figure out ways to not have to take this new information into account. So he tried to discredit Project Ito's novelization because it deviated from the original games in some ways. Like, for example, he cut out the Beauty and Beast unit because they're purely video game bosses and add barely anything to the story. Well, like, the symbolism that Kojima intended them to have could be expressed in other ways, and that's what Ito did. So I'm taking the liberty of highlighting certain passages from Mr. Wolf's book and juxtaposing them with other available information. So let's start with this. Mr. Wolf. Having read Ito's book myself, it is clear to me that Ito was writing what he wanted the game to be about, not what it really was. Ito's apologetics were a departure from Kojima's real sense. This is Kojima on Project Ito. The first draft soon arrived, and it surpassed my expectations. There was even a feeling, I have to say a nice feeling, of entrusting my own creation to a third party. Now, to anyone who's been following Kojima over the years, that is fucking huge. Because he's been wanting to pass down the Metal Gear series for years. But he never felt that his younger team could grasp the sense of his series, and so that's why he never left the director's chair. But with Project Ito, he sees someone who can take his ideas, understand them, and even build on top of and improve them. Here's another set of quotes. Mr. Wolf. The Ito novelization cut out some of the worst aspects of the story, reinterpreting it as a profound message about fatherhood, accountability, and so on. So he's saying that the game being about fatherhood is Project Ito's reinterpretation, him projecting what he wanted the story to be about onto the game, rather than faithfully adapting the game and Kojima's intentions.
I don't know, man. I got the father stuff pretty clearly in the game.
Sure, and to confirm it, here's Kojima. So I had Snake, who continues to fight despite his age. It's like a father going out and working hard every day to provide for his child, rather than simply telling them he loves them. Ironically, the chapter where Mr. Wolf attempts to discredit Project Ito is called Selective Memory. So there's one more thing about this game that I really want to get across in this show, but before that, just to set the stage, I've been listening to a bunch of Metal Gear Solid 4 critique videos and podcasts to prepare for this discussion, and I came across a quote that I think you'll be very interested in hearing.
Oh boy, can't wait.
Here it is. Both Metal Gear Solid 4 and Star Wars The Last Jedi are reliant on such a cynical meta-narrative that diminishes the lessons of its previous titles. So naturally, people who are big fans of those previous titles are going to be upset that what they've really enjoyed was invalidated by the same canon that they got it from.
Really? That's kind of... You know what? To the person who said this, I don't mean any ill will towards you. I'm sure you're a good person, but I can't agree with this at all. Even in the context of both The Last Jedi and Metal Gear Solid 4, there is some optimism in it. In fact, The Last Jedi was made in response to itself, because you're not supposed to take Luke's cynicism as a good thing. You're supposed to be fucking against it. And Luke comes back at the end of the movie doing the most badass thing a Jedi has ever done, which is force project himself across the galaxy to buy time for the remaining Resistance members to escape. A similar thing kind of happens in Metal Gear Solid 4 with Snake going into the microwave, so Raiden can have a chance at having his life back.
Fuck Rising.
You always have to say that, don't you?
Yes.
Okay. It's like... I can sort of see what they mean on the surface, because, yes, both pieces of media tend to question the series' philosophies more than other installments do, but it's not like a condemnation of the series. In The Last Jedi's case, it was there because it's the second to last movie of an ongoing story, so we have to wonder how we even got here in the first place. But even then, Rian Johnson didn't make The Last Jedi to say, yeah, fuck Star Wars, everything it stands for. Because if he did, he wouldn't have had Luke save the Resistance at the very end. Same thing with Metal Gear Solid 4, despite Snake's more cynical nature for most of that game. If Kojima really did make Snake so cynical, he wouldn't have continued his mission despite all these setbacks. He wouldn't have tried to help Raiden throughout the game. So, I just can't agree with that perspective at all. It's such a simple, fundamental misunderstanding of both pieces of media that I just have to wonder if you're not seeing these things for what they are, but what you perceive them to be.
I just want to say that in my notes, after I wrote down that quote, I said, have Hub go off on this.
Again, to reiterate to the person who said this, I'm sure you're a good person, I usually don't let one's opinions on media really dictate how I talk to them, but this kind of interpretation towards both The Last Jedi and Metal Gear Solid 4 makes me think they're the kind of person to see things the way they want to see them and not for what they actually are, which I can't get behind whatsoever.
And this is the biggest thing I want people to take away from this podcast. Metal Gear Solid 4 is not the antithesis of what the series stands for. It is an interrogation. Because after the backlash of Metal Gear Solid 2, Kojima had to rethink his inherent optimism that he brought to prior games in the series. For Metal Gear Solid 1, Naomi tells Snake that we mustn't allow ourselves to be chained to fate, to be ruled by our genes. And yet in Metal Gear Solid 4, she has cancer, which is a genetic disorder. In Metal Gear Solid 2, Snake tells Raiden that he can start over with a clean slate. Raiden said, I'm Jack the Ripper, a dirty reminder of a terrible mistake. But Snake tells him, you can stop being part of a mistake, starting now. But in Metal Gear Solid 4, Raiden still allows his past to define him. And with Metal Gear Solid 3, the boss's sacrifice led to the creation of the Patriots, which led to the war between Zero and Big Boss, and that resulted in all the chaos throughout the entire series. But Metal Gear Solid 4 doesn't stop there. Just like how Snake gets knocked down really hard, but keeps getting back up, Kojima got knocked down by Metal Gear Solid 2's backlash, but he still gets back up with his head held high and keeps pressing on with telling his message. Going back to Naomi, she passes on her work to Sonny, which leads to the destruction of the Patriots. Her life became a link to the future. For Metal Gear Solid 2, Snake continues to reiterate his message to Raiden, and at the end of the game, Raiden's happy ending from MGS2 is restored, fuck Rising. And with the fall of the Patriot system and American unilateralism, the boss's will is finally fulfilled. So even though Metal Gear Solid 4 seemingly undermines the franchise's prior optimism, at the end of the game, after a rigorous process of interrogation, Metal Gear Solid 4 ends up reaffirming each prior game's message stronger than ever.
Which is why I kind of feel like the whole argument that Metal Gear Solid 4 destroyed the series that they love doesn't really hold up under scrutiny.
Like, sure, you can critique parts of Metal Gear Solid 4's story, how Kojima's verbosity has gone way out of control, or how his dialogue has gone progressively worse, or how the highlights of the gameplay is very sporadic. But what you can't tell me is that Metal Gear Solid 4 is the antithesis of the entire series. It's a big, loud, grand finale celebration of everything that led up to it. Kojima had to juggle a lot of balls while writing this game because of all the characters and plot threads and moving parts throughout the series. And sure, he dropped the ball in some areas, but for a game that wasn't meant to exist, for a game that was made in response to Kojima's magnum opus being treated so poorly, and him taking that very personally, I think Metal Gear Solid 4 still does a phenomenal job at being the epic grand finale that this series deserved.
It was a roller coaster of highs and lows, but I ultimately don't consider it a waste of time. Granted, do I like it as much as the first 3 Solid games? No. Do I like it more than Metal Gear 2? No. But I will say that it was worth experiencing the game. Maybe if I replay it, maybe I'll like it more, maybe I'll like it less. But ultimately, I think Metal Gear Solid 4 is a flawed but very enjoyable finale to me. It's not a perfect finale. In fact, there are plenty of finales that I think are stronger than it. But on its own, I think it works. Not without some kinks, but I think it's good as a finale.
So at this point, you've pretty much played the entire series. There's like 2 other games that add to the overall story, but aren't really essential. Like, there's only one big series-impacting twist at the end of 5, but besides that, you've pretty much seen the whole thing from beginning to end. From the docks of Outer Heaven to Arlington Cemetery, you've been with Solid Snake through thick and thin. What do you think of his journey?
I think Solid Snake's journey is probably one of the strongest I've seen narrative-wise, because this is a guy who starts off blindly trusting Big Boss, but then gets betrayed. And then at the end of Metal Gear 2, he ends up being kind of cursed by Big Boss's speech at the end, which leads him to being a bit more no-nonsense and cynical to a point in MGS1. Then he's idealistic in Metal Gear Solid 2. And while he is, at the surface, much more cynical in MGS4, he ultimately still retains his beliefs. And he's lifted from his curse from Big Boss by the end. And I personally find that to be a really strong journey. I mean, granted, I didn't connect with Solid Snake as much as I did Raiden, but I still think Solid Snake's journey is a very impactful one. Because this is a man who had the shitty end of life, where he was told that he was doomed to be a soldier forever, and that really fucked him up. But at the end, he still manages to prove the world and Big Boss wrong about his fate. And I found that to be really, really meaningful. Because I feel like a lot of people, and, you know, I'm including myself here, we feel like we're tied to our fates in life because of one really bad experience. You know, I sympathize a lot with Snake feeling cursed by someone else's words, because I still feel that way to an extent. And I just seeing this person constantly get up from every setback imaginable, setbacks that would destroy a man's spirit, I think is, like, fucking incredible.
As a longtime Solid Snake fanboy, the thing that I've had to eventually come to realize is that Solid Snake isn't a hero because he's the strongest, or he did the missions the bestest. I mean, if Solid Snake sat on his ass during the Shadow Moses incident, Liquid Snake would have been fucked. Because it was tricking Snake into activating Metal Gear Rex that made Rex a threat in the first place. What makes Solid Snake a hero is that no matter how much life shits all over him, he powers on. He's the inferior clone of a warmongering terrorist who's haunted by his killer instinct, forced to kill his best friend and father, and people hate him for those actions just as much as he hated himself. He gets trained as an eco-terrorist and undergoes rapid aging because he was deliberately designed to age faster because his creators only intended his life to be nothing more than a tool of war. Anyone else would have been broken by any of these, let alone all of them at once. Yet Solid Snake takes it all in stride. At the beginning of the documentary Hideo Kojima's Gene, Kojima describes the marketing campaign for MGS4 as dissolve. When a flower dies, it spreads its seeds, which in turn creates new life. Solid Snake is infertile. He can't reproduce and have a child of his own. And yet just by living a life, being true to himself, setting an example for others, he was able to have a strong impact on others. Otacon went from being an anime nerd who mindlessly made weapons of mass destruction for his paymasters to being a hacker activist hero. Raiden went from being a tortured soul who feels chained to his past to someone who can strike out and pave his own way, and not in the retarded way that Metal Gear Rising says he does. He does so by putting the sword down and being with his family, because that's where he's truly happy. And even Naomi, who hated Snake initially, eventually learned the meaning of life thanks to him. And at the end of the day, even Big Boss understood that had Snake been in his place, he probably wouldn't have made the same mistakes he made. He realized that his clone son did a better job at honoring his mentor's will than he did.
That's fucking incredible.
That is why Solid Snake is the greatest hero in gaming history. And just as Solid Snake was able to quit his cigarettes, start over, enjoy life after his final mission was completed, Kojima was hoping that Metal Gear Solid 4 would be his last contribution to the series. Here is the ending of Hideo Kojima's Gene. Kojima was asked about the future of Metal Gear. This is his answer. We still haven't decided exactly what's going to happen, but I'd like to have a younger person direct it, while I take a step back and watch the birth of a new Metal Gear, along with everyone else. That was my plan 10 years ago, Metal Gear Solid 2, but I'd really like to see that happen more than anything else. And so the narrator says, with the completion of Metal Gear Solid 4, Kojima now steps away from Metal Gear to focus on developing new games. Metal Gear's genes, however, will be inherited by its next generation of designers. Like a flower scattering its seeds, new life will arise. And then Kojima would go on to direct 2 more Metal Gear games, and the internal Metal Gear project created without Kojima's involvement became such an aimless developmental disaster that it had to be scrapped, outsourced, and rebooted.
Oof.
Yeah, so there's this gigantic video that takes way too fucking long to watch, and it wastes your time constantly with just showing the cutscenes, but with weird anime music behind it. It's like, fuck you. Your video's already too fucking long. Now, granted, this podcast is probably going to be the longest thing we've ever done, so...
Until the rise of Skywalker.
Yeah. By the way, the video is called Metal Gear Solid 4 Was a Mistake, and it's a Mr. Plinkett prequel-style review of Metal Gear Solid 4, and I've tortured myself through it. It's not as good as people insist it is. Like, there's this one point where he was like, oh, how come the Patriots were able to implement SOP across the entire world? The Patriots only control America. Yeah, it's not like globalization and American economic dominance is a real thing that Metal Gear Solid critiques. And then there's that scene where Meryl is like, I want to be a bride. It's been my dream since I was a little girl. And then the guy says, really? I thought Meryl's dream was to become a soldier. In the bathroom scene, Meryl says being a soldier wasn't really her dream. It was just something she wanted to do to better understand her father. So the video's a gigantic waste of time and a piece of shit. Here's the real reason why Metal Gear Solid 4 is possibly a mistake. It tried to set the record straight on what the series stands for, but instead, it just muddied the waters even more, and with Ninja Raiden becoming so popular, that led to the creation of Metal Gear Rising Revengeance, which actually is the antithesis of the entire series. Not just in terms of gameplay. I don't mind the gameplay, I think it's fun. But in one of the early missions, you can call one of your codec contacts, Kevin, and Raiden will talk about how he used to be a child soldier called Jack the Ripper. But then he says, someone once told me you can find your own name and your own future. After that, I left behind Jack for good. And then later on in the game, he fully embraces being Jack the Ripper. So the game is explicitly a slap in the face to everything Solid Snake did for Raiden.
Yeah, big oof.
Fuck Rising, and if you think it's canon, fuck you too.
You will die on this hill.
Yes, I am going to die on this fucking hill. We haven't even done an episode on it yet.
Oh boy. I feel like that whole episode is just you going to be spurting out over Metal Gear Rising. Meanwhile, I'll just be like, yeah, I'll have my own things to say, but that's for a different podcast.
Which is going to be for a while because we're going to take a break from Metal Gear. Because you see, I got spoiled by something big in Ruby.
Yeah, and when he told me what that was, I was mad because I wanted to see his raw reaction to that. Now we can't. So, fuck you, Internet, for spoiling this man.
We are now in emergency Ruby mode. So we're no longer going to leapfrog between Metal Gear and Ruby, Metal Gear and Ruby. It's just going to be Ruby, 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 Ruby. And then we'll finish off the series later.
Yeah, for those of you who don't know, the next Metal Gear games at least the canon Metal Gear games that I have yet to play are Peace Walker and Metal Gear Solid 5 and Ground Zeroes. And then we're going to be doing an episode on non-Hideo Kojima Metal Gear games, which is primarily a discussion on Metal Gear Rising.
I think we're going to split that into 2 episodes. One, I'm going to rant about Portable Ops. And then the second episode, we're going to talk about Metal Gear Rising. Like the Portable Ops episode, we'll also talk about Acid and Ghost Babel, and it's basically going to be a history of Kojima trying to pass the series down to future generations and how it keeps fucking backfiring.
That's going to be an interesting episode.
Yep. But until then, you've been listening to Autism Exchange, the show where 2 Aspies share the things they're obsessed with. I am ForceWave.
And I'm HubPie, and Autism Exchanging is just another part of the life of an Aspie.
Have a nice day.
Catch you later.